Okay, welcome to Learneezee Cast, episode 6. And we're recording today. It's September 13th, and I have my usual guest and co-host, Rico Lazo. Hey, Rico.
Hey Pat, how's it going?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I wanted to start off by just talking about what's on my mind, usually our usual episode, what's on your mind, open discussion. Uh, as you know, school is starting. At least it's starting here in Germany, where I live in Baden-Württemberg as of tomorrow, Monday the 14th. And some kids are actually going to go directly to school. Yeah, at least the ones that are in grade school have to go directly to classes, and some are going to be doing this kind of program. I don't know how it is in Colorado, but in uh, Freiburg, the students from the 5th to the 13th grade, the high school age, they will have to split their classes up, and so some kids will go directly to class uh, on certain days, and other kids will stay at home on other days. Is it similar in the U.S. right now? I know you're in Colorado. What have you heard about it?
Yeah, I mean, not working in schools directly, I'm a little bit removed, but what I've gathered is that there's a combination of, in-class um, teaching as well as, of course, the online learning. And I
Hmm.
think it's sort of by school district is what I've gathered,
Hmm.
but also parent choice as well, allowing parents to choose either I want my children in school or I do not. I want them to be remote, or in some cases, everybody's remote. I'm not sure if it really varies by the age of the student or the grade level.
Hmm.
Um, but it's been a big topic of discussion as to what is the best approach. I think a lot of parents, of course, are really struggling at times to be able to work and make sure their students are learning, their children are learning. So it's been a very interesting topic of discussion for sure.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal note, my partner here, she's a teacher at the grade school level, which goes from the first grade to the fourth grade, and she's basically been told you have to go teach. There's no choice. And because of how well compensated teachers are here in Germany, uh, this kind of ability that maybe people in the US have to protest and say, hey, as a teacher, I'm not risking my life, is not even something that is brought up in the same way as you would expect it to be brought up. To say, hey, even though I'm not in a quote unquote risk group, it is still quite deadly to get this virus. And so maybe teaching in person makes no sense until there's a vaccine. Unfortunately, if you're a teacher in Germany, they've already checked whether you're in a quote unquote risk group, and then they've decided that since you're technically not in a risk group, that you can teach. Uh,
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think here in the United States, things are, of course, very different. But what I've gathered, working for an educational company, is that teachers are really looking for resources on how do you teach in this current um, situation. And I think a lot of the schools and districts aren't necessarily well versed on how to do that. I think this is new for everybody. I think obviously there are some practices that are probably more successful than others, and some approaches that are more successful than others. But I think it's, in a time of crisis, it's difficult to have a cohesive strategy and approach that's going to work for everybody. So I think everybody's kind of scrambling and doing the best that they can in this current environment. And I think it still remains to be seen, what's going to work best for everybody. But I think distance learning is here to stay in some capacity. And I think
mhm.
to your point, it sounds like in Germany, for the youngest students, it may not, of course, be the most effective, but for older students, it may provide opportunities that, in-class education instruction doesn't allow. So we'll have to continue just to see how things work, when it comes to teaching um, from distance or in person.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest group that's negatively affected outside of the teachers in terms of adults are the parents, right? And I saw an interesting article, which I did share on the Learneezee Facebook page from the New York Times education section, which I like to check out once in a while. It's one of my favorite sections. That gave some recommendations to parents on how to make sure that your child is reaching the learning goals as they study remotely. And that's really something that can be a huge concern, right? Your parent, as a parent, you're not sure if you're doing everything that you need to make sure that your child is truly improving and really meeting the levels that your child needs to meet, even though they don't have a teacher evaluating them. That you're the only one in
Yeah,
the
and
spectrum.
I think what I've also read too is that certain communities are going to be more severely impacted, of course, if you don't
Yeah.
have a good internet connection at home, if you don't have resources for every child in your home, if you don't have someone who can be at home with the children. So how do you manage all of those things as a parent? And I think especially for the youngest children, it's the biggest challenge. I think once your children get older, into adolescence, you certainly they have more autonomy, more ability to take ownership of their own studying and own learning. But for the youngest, I think we may be running the risk of having a generation that's going to be a step behind where they would normally be had it not been for, well, due to, I should say, the pandemic. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah, that's going to be interesting for me to see in the next few weeks and months ahead to see how this remote education, uh, online learning shift will change uh, generally how people deal with learning in general for the future. But let's move on from this topic, and I'd like to get into um, our topic of the week, favorite podcast we listened to uh, in the last couple of weeks. And I remember, Rico, you told me you had a favorite one that you wanted to share with the audience outside of
yeah.
ours.
So, well, as this podcast is really about learning and finding experts that are really great on a variety of topics. I've been listening to different podcasts just to learn how to be a better podcaster myself. And the one I found and listened to pretty consistently is How I Built This with Guy Raz,
Hmm.
Guyraz, Guy Raz, on
Hmm.
NPR. And he basically interviews entrepreneurs who have found success starting and running a business. And he really talks to them about their story on how they um, built their businesses, where the idea came from, the challenges they faced. And the most interesting question that he poses to almost every person he interviews is, um, how much did luck play a part in your success, and how much did hard work play a part in your success? And almost invariably, people say it's a combination of the two. That certainly, if they weren't in the right place or the right time, they certainly wouldn't have been as successful. But also, to their credit, that if you work hard, you can achieve a lot of your goals. And so I think he does a great job. I think he's a fantastic interviewer. He asks really tough questions, but he's also really informed. I think he does a great job of being prepared for the interviews, and he really, really knows a lot about people's lives, so that when he's interviewing them, he can really, really dig deeper. And so that's what I've also learned, that, by being prepared and really knowing your interviewee, you can really, really dig deep. And so for anybody who's out there listening, if you've not yet taken the time to listen to How I Built This with Guy Raz, do yourself a favor. A lot of the people he interviews, you're going to be familiar with, if not the entrepreneurs themselves, certainly the companies. So companies like Zappos.com, which is a big clothing and shoe website, um, and many, many others. So I highly recommend the podcast.
Cool, Rico. That's one of my favorite podcasts as well, and it's a very inspiring one for entrepreneurs like myself and you. So for those entrepreneurs, definitely go for it. Yeah. And talking about interviews, we're going to kind of move on to our experts corner, where we did our first interview with a lovely uh, person, Vira Mistry, a diversity and inclusion expert that's going to be featured on our site on learneezee.com. And we recorded this interview earlier, so I'm going to um, cut to the interview.
We're really excited today to have our first guest, Vira Mistry. And I want to take a moment to introduce her before we have her say a few words about herself. Vira Mistry is an intersectional feminist activist and co-founder of Know It, Name It, Love It, an organization that seeks to create better, safer, and more inclusive communities. She completed her master's at the International Institute of Social Studies in Den Haag, The Hague, focusing on gender, human rights, and social justice. Before moving to the Netherlands, she worked in Bangalore, India, with Blank Noise, an organization that designs participatory action projects to encourage citizens to take agency to end sexual and gender-based violence and mobilize communities to co-create safe spaces. Welcome, Vira. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Was there anything else you would like to say about yourself so our listeners know more about yourself?
So I worked with Blank Noise for about 2 years, which was very interesting. It came from a space of really moving back to India right after the 2012 gang rape case, which became international news, and really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my bachelor's degree and where I was trying to see my activism go. And so that was really interesting. I got to work on a lot of campaigns, but also demonstrations as well, and really, understand the issues that surround gender-based violence in India, whether it is within marriage or on the street, and also building on personal experiences of, I think, the cultural shock of moving back after 4 years of being in the US. Some of my freedoms being taken away, even though just not in the sense that my family wouldn't let me do things, but more as being a woman in society, as navigating the public spaces. And really coming to terms with that and trying to see what I could do with it. And then, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I see that that's what kind of pushed you towards this area of working in the field of diversity and inclusion. So Vira, like, how would you define that for the audience, the listening audience, and the audience on YouTube? How do you, how would you, put a focus on that? So that because it means different things to different people, and maybe with your experience, you have come up with a definition that really could help focus others on what you want them to think about when you think about diversity.
So there's a great diversity and inclusion activist and speaker, Berna Myers, and she says that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think that is a really good way of putting it, that while, we're getting more, the world is far more globalized in some ways, and we are having more people and diverse companies. Real inclusion actually means, are we allowing everyone's voices to be heard? So while you can have diversity, you may not have inclusion.
Interesting.
So it's not just about having a diverse workforce, but really making everyone feel that their voices are represented, and not just within maybe meetings, but also the infrastructure of the company. How many managers are people of color? How many managers are women? How many managers belong to the LGBTQ community? It's really about, are we really making people recognized? Are we really helping people feel safe within the environments that they're working in? So that's, I think, a very good distinction between when we talk about what is diversity and what is inclusion, and how do we actually move from diversity to inclusion.
Exactly, the next level.
The next level.
Yeah, and that's sort of my next question. So if we talk about the benefits and the importance, how do you actually go about implementing that in the workforce or in the professional setting? Because you mentioned, of course, we want to have a diverse workforce and we want to have that inclusion, but what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis? How do you make that happen, or how can you encourage companies to understand it and then implement?
I think it does begin with recognizing that companies need to do more. And I can go on about that. I mean, there are many statistics that say, you know, there's certain percentage increase in this if you have a diverse workforce. But on many levels, I think it comes down to not just interpersonal relationships, but also the infrastructure and the policies that companies hold. So it could be just the physical infrastructure of the building. Are we having gender neutral bathrooms? Are we having accessibility for people with disabilities? And then it's seen also in the way your executive board runs, how many people are being able to reach that space. But also, how do you handle issues of microaggressions or stereotypes or like assumptions within the workspace, and not being really defensive about it, but actively trying to unlearn it, and encouraging people to not take the defense at that point. Because at the end of the day, we all also don't know everything. But it's, you know, and I think in especially today with the Black Lives Matter movements, you are seeing not just saying, oh, I'm not racist, but really how are companies being anti-racist? What are the policies that we are implementing?
And you mentioned the term microaggression, and I think that's something that a lot of people understand, but for our audience, for people who don't understand that term microaggression, can you give maybe an example or two, just so people are kind of aware of that term and be aware of that concept? I think it's an important concept for people to take away and really reflect on.
So a microaggression is just, it's based, I think, on your own knowledge of a space that could be limited. And it can come from a space of ignorance, and it's benevolent, I would say. You know, it's not, and people do it and not mean it in a bad way. But I think it's about, well, you know, I've been in spaces where people have said, oh, you know, I really love curry.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
So it could, even for them, it could be a compliment in a sense, but it's actually somehow a backwards compliment, and so it's so that's why you might consider it to be micro. It's not meant to hurt.
Yeah. It's not meant to hurt. It's you know, I remember a friend telling me that she was with they were a group of Filipinos that were sitting and eating lunch, and this guy came up with them and was like, made a comment about, oh my God, rice.
Oh, wow.
You know, yeah.
It's a shock.
And you don't know how to react, because it's and this person obviously did not recognize how that was offensive.
It's true because for them, they thought it was just part of an observation, with no malice intended. Interesting.
Exactly.
This is good. It's good. Well, okay, so this is interesting for me, because these types of topics, to bring them out into the forefront, is what your course will be about, right? So what kind of topics outside of these microaggressions, like trying to make people aware of these microaggressions, what other types of topics will you cover in your course?
So I think it would my courses will like begin with really defining the concepts. So I think that's where we will start. What is racism? What is sexism? Homophobia? Even just like, what is the difference between race and ethnicity?
Interesting.
Because I think recognizing or being able to identify those kind of also helps you understand how your position with the company is viewed and how you view things within your company. So it would mean we have a term, intersectionality, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a lawyer in the US in the 1980s. And it really looked to see how our identities kind of merge together to either, you know, perpetuate oppression, or how certain bodies are more oppressed than others, depending on their different identities. So if this would be your sexual orientation, your gender expression, your race, religion, education level, nationality, and how they all interplay to like really kind of privilege or underprivilege you and your experiences in this world.
Wow,
Um,
that sounds like a massive course list for for our audience. I'm sure they'll be really excited to work with you.
yeah.
Anything else, Rico? Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, like, the length of the course, is this going to be a series, and how do you go, how are you thinking about, offering this course? Is this an in-person? I know obviously with the pandemic, there's probably a lot of virtual work happening, but what is sort of like the hope for your course and how you go about, offering the course?
So my hope is, and I'm still I'm still like working out the details because there is so much you can actually pack into it.
Yes.
But ideally, I would say it would be around 6 to 7 classes is what I'm aiming at. That would take you from why do we need diversity and inclusion, through the key concepts, looking at intersectionality, then also talking about like how do you make your company safer? What is an anti-racist policy? How do we involve like more inclusive communication? The words that we use, the way that not just the power, understanding our power within our relationships as well when you interact with other people. As a white straight man, you do have more power in like a company setting than a woman of color or a woman who is queer, so understanding that and how do you have inclusive communication, and then also how do you make the building that or just the infrastructure more inclusive in that sense, and then maybe going into a little bit of bystander training, so understanding what to do in a situation when you see harassment, really understanding are the policies that your company have in line with the work that you're trying to do. How do you change those policies? Do people, how often do reports come in? Or really, how do you educate even the employees in your company to recognize that kind of discrimination and step in?
Wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like a lovely primer for the HR department of most companies.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you'll be giving also individual online tutorials if necessary for HR executives if they require it, right?
Yeah, I mean that was kind of my hope with this was while I've done workshops in the past, a 2-hour workshop can only do so much, and I think that has its limitations. But working one-on-one with someone to really understand what the needs of their company is and being able to build on that. So really trying to, I think it would first be trying to really understand what do they think are the challenges within their company.
Yeah, so you're taking a consultative approach to the work, which is an excellent way to go about it. All right, but yeah, anything else, Rico? I think we've covered all our questions.
I just want to say that, Vira, I mean, I think your work is much needed.
We're
very happy to have you on. And how can others who are listening learn more about your work, and how can they get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you?
So right now our website is being rebuilt. I'm actually in the process of kind of changing it up a little bit. We've had to rearrange our organizational structure as well, given COVID. But I have my email address, which would be a great place, which is knowitnameitloveit@gmail.com. Or my personal address would also be perfect. Yeah.
Thank you, Vira.
And I just want to mention a little plug for Learneezee that Vira will offer some of her services as a partner through Learneezee. That will come when the course syllabus is completed. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Vira. Great.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's really great to learn about your work and to learn that this is much needed content that hopefully others will really take to and implement in their professional and personal lives. It was really great to speak with Vira. I think she brought a lot of interesting topics to the forefront and introduced a lot of vocabulary and different issues that people may not be aware of. And that's really, I think, what we're trying to do here at Learneezee is really bring awareness to a lot of topics and introduce experts so that you can learn about a variety of different issues and interests that you may have, or things you weren't even familiar with. And so I really enjoyed our time interviewing Vira.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear that, Rico. And I wanted to just point out one word, words of the podcast that came up during the interview. She mentioned something called microaggression. And I wanted to give the definition out just quickly. So it's a comment or action that subtly, often unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudiced attitude toward a member of a marginalized group, such as a racial minority. And as an example from the Webster's Merriam Dictionary, this example starts as like this: a digital photo project run by Fordham University student about racial microaggressions features minority students holding up signs with comments like, "You're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl." And that came from a quote from Jeannie Spiegler. Yeah. That was a great example of that, and we have to be careful of these little microaggressions. And to learn more about that, I will link to an NPR article that talks about microaggressions are a big deal, how to talk them out, and when to talk. I'm sorry, and when to walk away. Okay. All right. I think that'll be it for us, Rico. Anything else for our audience this week, or I guess this month, because we sometimes take a little while to get the videos out and, and the podcast
I
out.
would just say that, of course, with all that's going on, the pandemic, the global pandemic, of course, the fires that are burning in the United States, the election, presidential election coming up in the United States. There's a lot of topics to discuss, so please tune in to our next episode, in which we'll be discussing some of those topics. But again, Patrick, great interview with Vira this week.
Yep.
And looking forward to our next episode.
Awesome. All right. Keep learning easy. Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.